I'd like to welcome you all to RS's Day of Learning session about meaningful retirement. We'll be looking at retirement through both a Jewish lens and a psychological perspective as relevant, we hope, to all of us today. This is a really big topic and we only have 90 minutes. So in order to honor our ending time of 12:30, I apologize in advance if you feel pushed along throughout the session. There will be a short Q&A period at the end, but in addition, both Rabbi Kuhn and I will be staying on Zoom for another 15 minutes for anyone who wishes to chat further. And we're both open to receiving emails from anyone with additional questions or comments to share. To start with, Rabbi Kuhn, would you lead us in a prayer for study?
Yes, thank you, Michael. I think, Susan, can you share the text? As we begin any class, at Road of Shalom, we like to begin with our blessing for study of Torah, which is a blessing which thanks God for sanctifying us with commandments and also for the commandment of study, which we'll be talking a lot about today. So together, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi. So let me just start with some introductions. But given the number of participants and the fact that it seemed in our preliminary few minutes together that most of you know each other, we're not going to go around to introduce ourselves because that can suck up an awful lot of time. But please double check that the name that's appearing under your headshot in Zoom and on the directory of participants is correct, both your first and last names. And that's particularly important if you happen to be borrowing somebody else's computer or iPad. It's been a pleasure working with Rabbi Kuhn, whom I assume you all know as our esteemed emeritus rabbi. He brings both his depth of knowledge about Judaism and spirituality, as well as his own experiences with retirement to share with us today. Regarding myself, although I'm a member of RS, I only know a few of you. So let me introduce myself. I'm a psychologist who is almost completely retired from a lengthy clinical practice, but I try to model what it can mean to remain professionally active by consulting with congregations, coaching clergy, and providing leadership development coaching in several Wharton programs. I divide my free time between family, friends, volunteering with the URJ, and before COVID, doing a fair amount of international travel. My interest in retirement has not only been personal, but was significantly enhanced when I co-authored a book in 2016 with Rabbi Dan Roberts entitled The Clergy Retirement, Every Ending a New Beginning for Clergy, Their Families, and Congregants. In addition, Rabbi and I are grateful to fellow congregants Lloyd Brotman, whom I assume you all know as one of RS's past presidents and is an organizational psychologist in his spare time, and Roberta Brenner, who is a psychoanalyst in private practice and a longtime RS member, maybe the longest RS member on this call. And they'll both be helping us facilitate when we divide into breakout groups for a brief conversation. Last but absolutely not least, our thanks go to Susan Baer, who is serving as our tech angel, and she has guided Rabbi Kuhn and me through the logistics of preparing for this virtual session. So from a technological perspective, if things go well today, she gets full credit for that because we were a bit of a remedial class when she met with us a week or so ago. To give us all a sense of who's here, would all of you who think of yourselves as retired, please raise your hand. Let me see, gallery. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I got it. All right. And those of you who don't think of yourself as, or don't identify as retired now, but are planning on it or thinking about it, would you raise your hands? All right. And is there anyone here who doesn't fit into either of those categories? All right, well, good. Lloyd, what category do you fit in? You have to unmute. You're muted, Lloyd.
I'm not retired, and I'm actually not planning to retire anytime soon.
Well, that's interesting because that's what we're going to be talking about today. And in large part, what does it mean to be retired? And so I think probably a number of us fit into Lloyd's category or Lloyd's way of thinking about it, or will be doing that in the months and years ahead. So let me just give you an overview. After my brief introductory remarks, Rabbi Kuhn will be sharing a Jewish and spiritual lens for retirement, or about retirement as a foundation. I'll then talk about a psychological perspective, my own viewpoint on retirement. And then we will do brief breakout rooms to share thoughts about two aspects of our own individual views about retirement. We'll wrap up with a brief Q&A. This is, I mean, if you catch my comments about saying brief repeatedly, it's because this is the kind of topic that we could spend easily a whole day or 6 months of weekly conversations about because of the breadth and the variability about it. But we're going to do our best to squeeze in as much as we can in the time we have. So in a way of background and springboarding off of, I think, what Lloyd was getting at, let's talk about what retirement means. If we look in the dictionary, it says retirement is a withdrawal from active employment, service, or society. Now, I don't know about you, but I find that awfully limiting and practically, Karen's doesn't, and practically outdated. The period when, then it was mostly men, retirement was a period when mostly men were granted the opportunity to be relieved of their duties as laborers. Look, it was a time when they worked hard for many years, and frankly, lifespans were a lot shorter than they are today. The idea of retirement first was introduced in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as a break, a privilege, a reward for hard work. Social Security passed retirement, or was passed for retirement in, anyone have an idea how long ago? 1935. And at that point, the benefits started at 65. Of course, at that point, the average life expectancy was only 61.7 years. So from a financial perspective, they were pretty shrewd. Retirement benefits started at 65, but the average life expectancy was under 62. Things have changed a great deal. And they continue to change today. In developing parts of the world, life expectancy has significantly increased. Many of us can expect to live into our 90s, unless we get hit by that proverbial bus, or, we had bad fortune of inheriting poor genes. Life has become easier, not necessarily more meaningful, but with less physically strenuous work, increased reliance on machines and technology, and advancements in science and medicine, life expectancies are expanding or increasing every year. So instead of thinking about retirement as a solitary holding pattern until one dies, for many, it is now viewed as a new beginning, the next stage of life that provides an opportunity to reinvent oneself and invest in new interest, activities, and relations. Now, depending on one's financial circumstances, physical condition, and mental outlook, this can be a time of expansion rather than contraction, which is what it was in previous generations. And it is with such a positive perspective that I hope we are meeting today and will reflect more, continue to reflect more on retirement. So as soon as Rabbi Kuhn returns to his chair, I want to call on him to guide us as we explore what Judaism has to teach us about retirement.
Okay,
Rabbi,
thank you.
take it away.
Thank you, Michael. Well, Susan, I'm not quite ready for the text screen yet, so I'll let you know in a few minutes. But first of all, I want to thank Michael for joining me in this class, and it's been a real pleasure to work with him. I've known him for quite a long time. He's been extremely active on the national level of our reform movement, on the board of the URJ. And when they downsized the board into just a small group of heavy hitters, he made the cut, and he was one of the heavy hitters, and has really added so much to our movement. And he's done a lot behind the scenes for Road of Shalom as well. Also, I want to thank you, Michael, for this book on clergy retirement that you sent me when I retired. And but I think you could sell a lot more books if you changed the title to retirement, because there are lessons for everyone, not just clergy in there. But anyway, I appreciate what you've added to this field. Before I begin, I just want to give you a little background. I retired about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. And, I had been thinking about it a long time, and, it seemed like a good idea. And I was really getting to the age where the brutal pace of the rabbinate was just getting to be too much for an older fellow. And I had these fantastic colleagues that I felt very comfortable leaving, passing the torch to, and they've done such a beautiful job. So I just want to thank Rabbi Mader, Rabbi Freidman, for all that they've done for our congregation too. And as I know you share that sentiment with me. But when I retired from this job, and I call it a love of working in this field, that I loved every second of it. But I poured all of the energy, all of the creativity, all of the love that I had into this work. And it was absolutely more than a full-time job. So when you retire from the rabbinate, you just have to cut it off. You have to get out of the way and let your successor establish herself. And it didn't take her too long to do that, but it meant that I had to just completely turn it off. And that was hard. I mean, I really didn't realize how hard it was going to be. And I'm sure that you can all relate to this if you are retired, that it's very difficult. Even though you've thought about retirement for a long time, it's very difficult just to give it up because you almost have to reinvent yourself. You have to rethink who you are. Uh, I remember in the days before retirement and after, everybody I would talk to would say, "What are you going to do next? I mean, now what? Now what?" And, I was asking myself that too. So, but what that really means is, who am I? Who am I now? What is this life that I have? What's my purpose? And what is the meaning of my life? And I think that's what we all ask when we retire. So I think that's really kind of the overview of what we would like to talk about today, to think about the sanctity of life. That's really what Judaism is all about. Every life cycle event in Judaism revolves around this concept that life is sacred. Every day is sacred, from birth to death, the bris, the baby naming, consecration, bar and bat mitzvah, confirmation, marriage. The ceremony is called a kiddushin, with that word, the root word of kadosh, meaning holy. That's the usual translation, but in Hebrew, there's a much more profound meaning to kadosh. It means to be separate, to be special, to be set apart, to be set above the mundane. So that when you're married, you take this partner to be kadosh to you, separate, special, set above all other relationships. The funeral, the most important prayer is the Kaddish. There's that word again, kadosh, talking about the sanctity of life, even as we lose a loved one. And then the most important holiday of the year for Judaism happens every Shabbat. And the beginning of Shabbat is marked by the Kiddush, the sanctification of the day. So what I think is that we need to sanctify our retirement. We need to think about retirement in terms of what my life means. And to be Jewish means to be ever evolving and ever growing. This week's Torah portion, Vayishlach, talks about Jacob wrestling with the angel or whoever that is, a man, but it's probably an angel of some kind. And so Jacob is struggling with God, and the angel changes Jacob's name to Yisrael, meaning one who struggles with God. So to be a B'nai Yisrael, to be an Israelite, to be a Jew, means to struggle with God. And what does that mean in terms of retirement? It means to be thinking, struggling with our identity, with our relationships, with our life, and what our life means now that we are no longer clocking into work every morning. So now, if I could ask Susan to put up the text, we'd like to put this within the context of Jewish wisdom. And of course, when we retire, usually you are getting up there in years, and so that you're becoming what we call in Judaism, in the Hebrew word zaken, which typically means old. So here in this first verse, would somebody like to read that? Could I have a volunteer? Just unmute yourself real quick and read that. The Leviticus 19 verse.
You shall rise before the aged and show deference to the old. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord.
Okay, thank you. So what's this all about? Why do we have a commandment in the Holiness Code, no less, which is like the ultimate ethical list of foundational morality that we have? Why is this so important? So you can unmute yourself and just pipe in, and then you can mute yourself, go back into your little mute cave. Anybody, why is it important to rise for the aged and show deference to the old?
Isn't it kind of like the being showing deference to your parents?
Okay, that's good.
Kind of combined with that because your parents are older, so
Yeah.
it's similar.
That's good. Other thoughts?
I just want to say that it freaked me out the first time that somebody got up and offered me a seat on the bus.
Yeah, well,
Means you have to take
behind that?
responsibility and do things to earn your keep, not just monetarily, because there are all different kinds of currencies, but to earn your keep within society and within your family and the rhythm of our religion.
Okay, good.
I think also it's an acknowledgement that we all go through this phase of life, and we want to continue to remember that as we honor our elders, we will eventually be elders and be honored by our children. So it's kind of perpetuating a desired value system, I think.
That's good. I like that. There's another side of this. We live in a utilitarian age, and is there some reason that a young person would want to could get something out of being deferential to the elderly? What do you?
They get left in the will.
Well, yeah.
Wisdom.
Wisdom, yes.
Lot to
Very good.
learn.
I like that.
Wisdom.
That's good.
If you were smart enough to know that the elderly have wisdom.
Absolutely. That, to me, is what this is all about.
Absolutely.
And in Jewish tradition, there's an interesting play on words. Zakein means old, but it really means ze kana chachma, one who acquires wisdom. So that takes us to the second verse in Genesis 24, right below that, about Abraham. Could somebody read that, please?
I'll read. If Abraham was now old, advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed, I don't know why I said if. Abraham was now old, advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things.
Okay, good. Thank you. So what do you think this means?
Yeah. Rabbi, the way I felt, somebody mentioned wisdom before, but I was also thinking about 78 as helping really the next generation down with some of the issues that they may see in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And I think that's the way I look at it. In other words, you have the wisdom, you have some of the know-how and issues that they may be going through, maybe even at a younger age, in forced retirement, as the case may be.
Yes, we're role models our entire lives. Just because the kids leave the house at a certain age does not mean we ain't role models. We're role models our entire lives to go through all of the stages of our lives, so our children know where they're going.
Okay, good. One of the most interesting commentaries on this short verse is that Abraham came along, literally it's ba b'yamim, came along in days, And in other words, Abraham's accumulated days were each filled with learning and achievement. He, of course, is our role model for this class. Each day is filled with learning and achievement, meant with each passing day, his worth increased. So that's something for us all to think about, to take away from this class today. Every day, your worth increases, or at least you have the potential for your worth to increase. So therefore, in Judaism, being a zaken, here's another reason you stand for the elderly, is that old age is regarded as one of the greatest blessings that God can bestow upon us.
And Rabbi,
Yes.
sort of an interesting point, because, frequently people feel like they're diminished as they get older. And this actually teaches the opposite lesson.
Very good. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, we can be the elderly. I mean, not that any of us here are elderly, but it's you can be a valuable commodity. You can really help society if you only find a way to do that. So,
Rabbi, one of the things that
yes.
you mentioned, achievement and learning, most of us at this stage in our late 60s to 70s have achieved in whatever we did in life. And what I feel helpful is when I see our kids in their 40s and their grandchildren, I'm still learning, and I'm learning things in different ways than I might have years ago. So the learning is definitely still taking place. And if it doesn't take place, I would imagine that dementia, other types of things could develop possibly. So learning continues throughout life.
Good. And I like the way you frame that, because the achievement the things you achieved while you were working, now you have to almost redefine what you mean by achievement. And that's the key to understanding who you are now. And so Judaism believes that, the very nature of human life is that people know true happiness only when they have creatively contributed to the world in which we inhabit. So, in other words, we all have a mission. It's just up to us to figure out what that mission is exactly.
Rabbi,
Go ahead.
there's a famous quote by Ronald Reagan when he was debating Walter Mondale, in case anybody forgot, when he said, I want you to know that I also will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
One of the great lines of debate history. Thanks, Jerry. So this verse from Abraham has so much meaning. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav looked at it as meaning that the day you were born is the day God decided that the world could not be preserved without you. If you're still alive, that means that you have something left to do. God has granted you a single additional day of your life, and that means that you haven't yet concluded your mission in life. There's still something for you to achieve in the world. And I like to think that one of the most important things you can achieve is study. Torah study, just by being here. Obviously, I'm preaching to the choir. I mean, you made the effort to join this class, so you understand this. But just think about that beautiful song in Fiddler on the Roof when Tevye sings about, if I were a rich man, he would discuss the holy books with the learned sages 7 hours every day, and that would be the sweetest thing of all. So we have to keep studying in order to try to really understand what our life is all about. So let's let's look now at the Numbers, the verse in Numbers. And this one is interesting because it's the only place in the Torah where they actually give you a mandatory retirement age. And it's the Levites have to retire when they're 50 at verse 25. So the Levites had to set up the tabernacle, the portable tent of meeting, when the Israelites would travel through the wilderness, and they would have to set it up, and then they would have to break it down and schlep it to the next place. But it was considered very sacred work because all these really important objects for the sacrifices and the prayers. So it was difficult work. It was hard physical work. One of you just said something about, I think Michael, about back when everybody worked on a farm, and it was difficult, hard work. So at the age of 50, they had to retire. But the interesting thing, there were all these debates in the Talmud about what happens next. Well, they were supposed to go to the tabernacle and stand guard. And then when the temple was built in Jerusalem, after they were 50, the Levites would work in the temple. They would actually they would sing in the choir, and that would be their job. So until their voice gave out, and then they would stand guard in the temple in Jerusalem. So in other words, Judaism believes that even if you retire from active work, as we call it, there's still plenty of work for us to do. Okay. So any thoughts or comments about this so far?
I have a thought about the comment, at the age of 50, they shall retire from the workforce and shall serve no more. Our whole conversation is about the fact that you can retire from the workforce as you knew it, but you continue to serve. So it's kind of an outmoded concept that you will serve no more.
Good. I think that's why the sages picked up on that. Thank you.
I always ask people, how do you make money as opposed to what do you do for a living? Because what the person is may not be how they make their money.
That's good. Well, that reminds me of that one of my favorite stories, which happens to make an appearance in Michael's book also, about the meaning of work. That there were these three guys, I shouldn't say guys, three people who were hauling bricks to build the temple in Jerusalem, in ancient Jerusalem. And somebody came up and asked one of them, "What are you doing?" And the first one said, "I'm hauling bricks." And then somebody asked the second one, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm working, trying to make some money to feed my family." And they asked the third one, "What are you doing?" And the third one said, "I am building the house of God." So it's all a matter of how you look at it.
Yeah. Rabbi, just a quick thought on the age of 50, which you say, obviously was in Numbers 8:25. When I think of 50 professionally, I say to myself that I know a number of people who retired from their first career and moved on happily into their second career, into final retirement. So 50 today is a marker. It reminds me a little bit of a very famous book, which I'm sure all of you have read, by Mark Freidman, called Encore. Most of you have heard of it. And he talks about what do you want to do in the second half of life? From that 50 on, what do you want to do? And what meaningful do you have that you weren't able to do in your first career?
Okay, good. Well, I'm just about out of time, so I'd like to close by, again, returning to this idea of a retirement based in sanctity, of kadosh, to be separate, to be set apart. That if we know that we are the children of Yisrael, B'nai Yisrael, that we are called upon to struggle, that life shouldn't just be, I mean, retirement, just sit back, put your feet up, sit on the porch in your rocking chair, and that's all you ever have to do again. Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not exactly what Judaism says is our calling. So to struggle with our identity, with our relationships, with our activities, with our purpose. What is our purpose? And so just a thought to close on. I think we go back to this verse in Genesis that says, it's not good for a human being to be alone. You can't just be alone. And it's a difficult thing during COVID, I know, but find a way to reach out and connect with other people. There's this great story about someone who I think was a real role model for me and for so many of us, Claire Levi of blessed memory, who died recently. And most of you probably remember her. She moved here with her beloved husband, Charles, a long time ago, from not that long, maybe 15, 20 years ago, from Buffalo, joined our congregation, and jumped in with so much enthusiasm to become a member, an active member of the congregation. She didn't know anybody here. She moved here because she wanted to be near her children, and she didn't let that stop her. She moved in, started coming to services, Torah study, went to every activity, and she connected with people. So this was really one of the great role models for us when we came up with our vision to try to create profound connections. So here we have an opportunity in this congregation to connect with each other and to not be alone, not just sit on that proverbial porch with your feet up the rest of your life. And in doing so, you will be able to really, I think, try to better understand your purpose and be a seeker all the time. As the Psalm says, we should number our days so we attain a heart of wisdom. So how do you do that? By thinking about the real meaning of your life. And I hope that you'll be able to do this. And I hope we have some good discussion about this in the next time, the next little bit of time we have left. Thank you.
Rabbi, thank you. And thank you for once again reminding me of how much I appreciate study. No matter how much I think I know about a subject, I find I always walk away from Torah study and study in general with another angle, another perspective. So thank you very much for that. I want to build on what Rabbi shared with us and some of your comments as thinking about retirement, again, from my personal perspective and maybe a psychological perspective. The question of retirement in previous generations was mostly related to eligibility and finances. The question was, when can I retire rather than should I? And then what will retirement mean for me? Times have changed. As I mentioned earlier, boomers are not traditional retirees as we knew them. Much is new for this generation. Generally, people are living longer and have had a higher quality of life than their predecessors. Retirement no longer means simply stopping work. That's a notion that several of you have alluded to. Rather, we should view retirement as the next stage of one's life. Certainly, some folks anticipate retirement with less than an optimistic perspective. Instead, this is seen as a time of loss, loss of purpose, loss of position, loss of financial security, and eventually loss of health. For them, it is not the beginning of something new and exciting. It is the beginning of the end. As a psychologist and generally a positive person, I choose to take the more optimistic perspective. The glass of my life has generally been at least half full, and so I very much look forward to this next stage of my life. However, that doesn't mean that I believe we will and effortlessly slip into this new way of living. As with most significant changes, this evolution is accompanied by new and increased stressors, the most prominent being financial security, use of time, and sense of purpose. In general, it is the uncertainty which the future brings that many find unsettling or even outright disturbing. The increased longevity that many of us may expect can be a blessing, but it can also be a curse. Will we be in good health and have vitality to enjoy the new experiences that our days will offer? Will we have sufficient financial resources to maintain our lifestyles and enjoy more free time? Will we have people with whom to share our lives? What will we do to replace our careers and former responsibilities? Who will we be? It should come as no surprise that I don't have answers to these questions for myself, let alone for all of you. No one can. Instead, we are best served by taking control of those aspects of our lives that we can. In other words, we need to plan for retirement. Now, again, parenthetically, let me reiterate that I do not use the word retirement in that negative way of the glass half empty kind of perspective. I don't see it as an end. I see it as another stage of life. So this planning starts with self-assessment. To gather information that can serve as a foundation, we need to consider a whole variety of topics or issues. So here's a list that I've generated, but it's certainly not exhaustive. We need to consider our current financial situation and what our projected needs are. Our successes and satisfactions and frustrations experienced to date in our careers and hobbies. That is, what are the things that added meaning to our lives that we don't want to lose, even though we're no longer working in that same job? What is our social and emotional state? What have we found, again, most fulfilling, most gratifying, enriching about our lives, and that we would want to not lose, but in fact, actually perhaps find ways of enhancing? We need to think about our family supports and our responsibilities. Hopefully, we're not alone. And yet, with those relationships do come responsibilities. And we need to think about those as we're thinking about this next stage of our lives. And then finally, as Rabbi was talking about, we need to think about our social network. Who are the people with whom we're going to share our time, our lives? Who are the people with whom we can partner to enrich the quality of life and make this a better world? These changes associated with your retirement will not just impact you. And we too often forget about the impact they'll have on other people, the ripples that these changes will have, on our family, on our colleagues, and on our coworkers. And that's part of what the structure of the book on clergy retirement was about. It was about loss and new beginnings, the opportunity, recognizing and appreciating the loss that many clergy and those of us who are not clergy experience. I often, in working one-on-one with rabbis, they've often said, when thinking about retirement, who will I be when I'm no longer the rabbi? In fact, very often in congregations, people think that the rabbi's first name is rabbi. And through that, the way they relate to the rabbi, congregants are often denying or fooling themselves that the rabbi doesn't have a richer, more comprehensive life other than the role that he or she is playing in the congregation. When talking about this book with both some lawyer friends and some several of them have said to me, you could change the title of this book. You could write a very similar book with just different anecdotes about doctors or about lawyers. When giving up their career, many of them have felt they were giving up their identities. Hopefully, you don't view your life in that way. And you can see that whether you're using the skills that you've developed in your profession or your career in new and different ways, or whether you're just moving on to a totally different activity, a way that you find enriching to your lives, that you haven't lost who you are, but you're having a new chance to enhance or enrich that. And to me, that's what retirement really is. It's not an ending, it is a beginning. And it's an opportunity that many of us have been blessed to take full advantage of. So with that, Susan, let's break here. And literally, Susan is going to work with the Zoom gods and divide us into 4 breakout rooms that I think we've set for about 15 minutes, and then we'll be back together. Susan?
Give me just a minute to get the moderators in each one.
And Susan, what do we do about muting while we're in the subgroups?
You will be able to mute and unmute yourselves.
All right, good. Thanks.
Let's see, Michael.
Hey, Michael, I would love to have that list of things to think about, since I'm just starting to think about these things.
Okay, I will.
Can you maybe send out after the thing a copy?
Yeah, who was asking that? I couldn't see.
Oh, Karen Wisnia.
Hi, sure, Karen. I'd be happy to.
All right, and how long do you want these rooms to last?
What time is it now?
11:54.
Let's say 15 minutes.
Okay, let me.
While Susan's doing that, I wanted to piggyback on, I think it was Don who said earlier, he referred to the book Encore. There are, if you haven't looked on, I was going to say in the library or in the bookstore, but if you haven't been online lately and looked at books related to retirement, there is a plethora of them, taking all kinds of different perspectives. But in general, they are each person built on the similar kind of philosophy that we're talking about here, about retirement as a new beginning, as an opportunity, and an enhancement. Susan?
Yep, I'm ready. All right, so I'm going to move you guys to the rooms, hopefully.
All right. So, Susan, I'm still only seeing my group. Oh no, there's Jonathan. And I can't hear.
People are coming back. They were given 1 minute more.
Okay. You're so generous. Thank you.
We're here.
That's how the system works.
I thought it was your generosity.
You're very well behaved too.
Well, except even if you weren't, the system won't let you stay. So.
Exactly.
It will
Exactly.
kick them out
Cancels.
very shortly.
All right, let's just give everyone a few more minutes.
Yep, here, I think the rest are all coming back. We've got one more group. Here they come.
How many groups did you have?
We have 4.
Oh, wow. Nice small groups.
That was the plan.
Very nice.
You know, we're all living in the world of Zoom. I get very frustrated when we have these breakouts supposedly to make it more personal and interactive, and then you have, 12, 15 people in the group.
I know.
Yeah, it doesn't
No,
work.
that's great. I'm glad you were able to do that.
Okay, Susan, how are we doing? Do we have? Looks like I don't see the rabbi.
No, he's back.
Is everyone back?
I think everybody is back.
Yeah, there's the rabbi.
Oh yeah, there's the rabbi. Okay, yes. So let's just take a few minutes, and I want to call on each of the breakout room facilitators just to give us a few minute highlight of what were the important things that you took away from the conversation, or maybe something that surprised you. So noteworthy or surprising, whatever. And Roberta, how about you tell us about your group?
Sure. We had a wonderful group, and it's so nice that you allowed for a nice small discussion group. Everyone seemed pretty happy with what they're either being retired or getting ready to retire. There was, oops, wait a second. I put my own timer on for the 15 minutes. So I felt there was a real positive feeling. There were concerns. There was some concern about not finding something that one wanted, sort of this idea, okay, here's what I want to do, and then that not being available. So there was a concern about that. Being a grandparent was something that was nice with retirement. Being able to reduce stress was also prominent. The idea of having some structured time, but also the freedom to read a newspaper, take a walk, take a nap, and not feel too badly about that you don't have time for that. I would say, I thought I guess I'm a little surprised about how happy everybody is in retirement. It's so different than what we would hear, like, oh, you retire and then that's the end of your life. And clearly this is such a new version that we're experiencing, but it was a great group and really great planning.
Thanks for facilitating that group. Lloyd, how about your group? What did you take away?
Unmute.
Please.
Everyone was very pleased with your presentations and found them very useful and thoughtful. And I asked whether anyone was surprised by anything they heard, and everyone said no, they're not surprised. But nevertheless, it's useful to talk about this. It's useful to think about it, because you're never done planning. You can't just plan for retirement and then do it. You have to kind of keep planning and redefining and keep figuring it out along the way. So despite the fact that no one was surprised by what they heard, there was no aha experience, it resonated because everyone is in that process. This issue of of redefining the word retirement, I think, is something that our group talked about and felt pretty strongly about. That if someone says to you, are you retired? Probably the best answer is a question. What do you exactly mean by retirement? If you mean, am I still earning money the way I always did? Well, maybe I'm retired. If you mean, am I sitting on a bench all day? Well, no, that's not it. If you mean, do I have a purpose? Well, yeah, I have a purpose. So I guess I'm not retired if that's what you mean by retirement. So you always have to know what the terms are. If you say you're retired, probably you need to be clear because people have different definitions of retirement. The other thing that struck me about what we discussed was one of the things that came up was the aspiration to remain in good health. And we talked about the fact that, well, some of that's within your control and some of it is not within your control. And where we got to at that point was, well, then I guess you have to differentiate between what's in your control and what isn't in your control, and then do our best to control the part that's within your control. So if part of good health is exercising, well, then that's the part that you have to pay attention to, and that could be a challenge, getting yourself up to exercise every day. But if you aspire to good health, then you want to do the things that are within your control to maintain good health. And really, I think the other piece that struck me was, in many ways, as people retire, their purpose remains the same. Helpers like to continue to be helpers. Doers like to continue to be doers. And it's finding a way to continue that purpose beyond what you used to do.
Thank you, Lloyd. Rabbi?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lloyd and Roberta, for facilitating. Sounds like you had good groups. I would say the highlights that came from our group were, one of the most interesting things was a comment that that some people have been able to find a way to use some of the same skills that they used when they were working full time to do things now after retirement, whether it's working with children. One very interesting comment was someone who was a principal in a school in a poor neighborhood has now been able to work with the DA's office to work with first-time youth offenders. I thought that was inspiring, using many of the same skills. Others have found ways to do something totally new. In fact, 2 people said that their spouses have taken up painting in retirement. And I'm not sure that either of them knew that about the other, but I thought that was great. Also talking about health, Lloyd, we had some discussion about that as well. But one of the things that really inspired me was that a couple likes to study together online. They take a course that they found, like a university level course, and they do it together. The spouses do it, listen to the course together, and then they discuss it with each other following that. I thought that was such a nice way to, especially during COVID, to try to further or enhance your relationship with your partner. And finally, the idea, I guess the most interesting comment was, I like to find ways to stay interested and to stay interesting. I really, I love that. And I think that's something we can all shoot for. So, and then to savor life more, maybe in a little bit slower pace would allow us to savor life more. Okay.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi. So let me say the last group was the one that I was in. And shock of all shocks, we discussed the same things you did. Maybe not all of them. We were so involved in the first question, we never really got to the second. So time management is a challenge for us. I guess we could think about that, how to do that better in retirement. But seriously, the big issue was what to do with my time. How can I take advantage of this and not be bored? And basically, we came up with many of the answers that the rest of you did as well. If we're going to see this as an opportunity and not as a curse, we have to make something positive out of it. That was a challenge. One person asked, well, what will I do in my professional career? I was nonstop all the time, and one of the suggestions I had was something that I've often used with groups to thinking about retirement, and that is to think back to the time when you were working nonstop, and you would periodically would say, oh, if I only had time, I'd like to, or I wish I had time to do, fill in the blank. It's those blanks that you now have time for, and you can take advantage of and enrich your life with. So it was really good to have an opportunity for you to interact with each other more personally, more deeply. We have about 5 more minutes that if anyone has some additional questions that you want to share with the whole group, either ask each other or Rabbi or myself, let's use our time to do that. Anyone?
I had a question, and it
John.
may be directed a little bit to the Rabbi, but to anybody else who thinks about it. So Rabbi, just because, your position as clergy was unique, you described how you had to really make a clean break from Road of Shalom for that year, give or take, to let folks find their feet. That's something, sort of run into even in the, in the professional field too. Just, my experience was I left my position. Initially, I was asked to sort of help out a little bit for a transition, and that immediately didn't work out at all because the people who were left behind felt that, I was sort of in their way and it undermined them and all this other kind of stuff. On the other hand, the organization had asked me initially to stay around because they were concerned about the new people and whether they were really ready to step up and do everything. So I don't know if anybody's got any insight on that. I think my lesson has been is I should have just made a clean break too. It would have been better for me and for them. But that's not always how it happens.
Jonathan, I would tell you, no surprise that you're not the only one who has dealt with that challenge. In fact, Scott was talking about it in our group. It's not at all uncommon with entrepreneurs or business startups. And there is no one right answer. What Rabbi was talking about is commonly believed as best practice for clergy, particularly senior clergy, is to give your successor space. And I think there's much to be learned from that model in business and certainly other professions. But I will also tell you that, I know congregations where the emeritus is still very actively involved, but the successor and the emeritus have worked out a wonderful relationship and created boundaries, so clear expectations. And that's why the situation, Jonathan, you're referring to or Scott referred to, often doesn't work out well because there hasn't been enough planning to define what those roles will be in terms of leadership and followership. Rabbi, did you have anything else to add in response to Jonathan?
Not really. I think you covered it very well. Thanks.
Yeah.
I will say that parenthetically that it was a good idea to skedaddle for a year, but it was the hardest thing I ever had to do.
Right.
And it was awful, but it had to be done. It had to be done. And it worked out fine. I mean, now we have a great relationship and we work together very well.
What I was going to say, Rabbi, is, and it's often not just in your situation, your relationship with Rabbi Maderer, but it's for the congregation to begin to look to someone else as the senior clergy, or in a business as the president or the chairman of a department or whatever. Right. There needs to be the Hebrew phrase tzimtzum is making space for the other to move into, and it's really really important for successful transitions. So
Michael, could I just add to what you're saying, and Rabbi Kuhn, how many synagogues do you know that have had successfully and gratefully 2 senior rabbis participate with the synagogue? Is that unusual to have Alan Fuchs and Bill Kuhn, both of them?
You mean emeritus, not senior?
Or seniors?
Emeritus, yeah.
Emeritus. I meant emeritus. I'm sorry.
Emeriti. I think it's unusual, David, but not because we are so unique, but because we are blessed by having had 2 senior rabbis who were able to retire young enough and healthy enough so that they've stayed vital and could participate.
And who didn't move to Florida?
Sometimes, but it's what I often see is there was a period of time when rabbis stayed too long, and that is too long. You could say the same thing as a physician or a lawyer or almost anything, and then they were by the end they were so exhausted, they were so wrung out that they didn't have much to continue to offer, and then also often they died shortly thereafter. So I think it's a longevity kind of issue more than it's the goodwill of the congregation. Now, what I would say about Rodef Shalom that I've gleaned from the years now that I've joined Rodef Shalom is there is an openness, a goodwill. There is an embracing, a kavod to the retired clergy that you don't often see. You correct myself. You don't always see in other congregations, and that's very sad for the congregants as well as for the clergy.
I have a question.
Michael, can I just comment on your comment about tzimtzum, because I was thinking about that as you were saying it. You and I both work in leadership development, and oftentimes the conversation I've had with business leaders is not unlike the conversation you just had about clergy, that there are 2 challenges to being a leader. One is when you step into a role, your challenge is to expand. Your challenge is to become bigger. Your challenge is to become grander and more expressive. But the second challenge of leadership is to contract and to make room for the next generation and to make room for the future leaders so that you don't lose them, so that they don't leave and go somewhere else. You've developed them, now you need to give them a chance to lead, whether you're the founder of a company, whether you're a senior clergy, whether you're a teacher, whatever it is, it's to contract. So it's both those pieces, expansion and contraction.
And it's really frustrating in an organization when you have one of the 2 parties willing and able to do that and the other not. And that's where we often have conflict.
I have a question for the rabbi.
Jerry, excuse me. Muriel, you were trying to say something?
I have a question for the rabbi. How does Emily feel about you being in the house?
Jerry, excuse me. Muriel was going to speak.
Oh, I'm
next.
sorry. I think you said me.
That's okay, Jerry. I
Go
just
ahead.
want to say, Rabbi Kuhn, I'm always happy to hear you or see you do Torah study.
Jerry, you're up.
Rabbi, how does Emily feel about you hanging around the house all the time?
I think we're out of time.
I knew I
Jerry,
would get a
that's
good answer from
personal.
you.
Well, I will tell you, Jerry, I will tell you that I've done some groups of rabbis pre-retirement, like 3 years before or 5 years before retirement, and the planning about it. And one of the exercises is to go back home and talk to your spouse or your partner and to begin that discussion about what's life going to look like. And one of my favorite ones is the one spouse of a rabbi said, "I'm happy to have you around. I'm happy that you're not going to be so stressed out, but don't expect me to have lunch with you every day. I have my own life." To me, that's a sign of a healthy relationship and a good marriage.
That's good.
Let me just pull this together, toward the end, and we still will have a few minutes to chat if you'd like. I think there are a couple of really important takeaways. And one is that there is no one right answer or path, just as there's no one precise way of defining what retirement means in our generation. There is no one preferred way of retiring or thinking about our lives. And the other part is that I would say is an absolute is my experience is that people who have been intentional about thinking about or planning this stage of their lives are the ones who are the most successful, are the ones who are the happiest. Rather than just assuming it's going to take care of itself. I think, like most complex things in our lives, this stage, or this transition into this stage is a challenging one. And if we can be planful, if we can be intentional, we have the greatest chance of finding happiness or satisfaction. I want to thank Rabbi Kuhn for the opportunity to work with him on this project. We want to thank both Roberta and Lloyd for helping us professionally facilitate the small discussions. And of course, I want to thank Susan for helping us make this happen. Rabbi and I now know a lot more about Zooming than we did before, from the other side of the camera, so to speak. Finally, I've been asked by the planners of today to remind you to please complete the evaluation form that's available on the RS website. So that's about it for the formal part of what we're doing today. We still have some time if anyone wants to hang out and chat with each other, not necessarily with Rabbi and myself, but because there's a lot of wisdom in the group. But we will hang out with you as well. It's been a pleasure. Nice meeting some of you. Nice seeing some old friends, and look forward to many happy occasions when we might see each other in person sometime in the future, not too distant future.
And I put in the chat the link for the evaluation.
Oh, thank you, Susan. Oh, some of you had asked for,
Yes.
two of you had asked for a list of some of the things I suggested we think about. I will I will email those to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually have to get back to work, so I'm going to go.
Work.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye. Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care, Jeff.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Bye-bye, everybody. Wonderful group. Thank you.
Thank you,
Same
Roberta.
here. Thanks for your
Sure.
help.
Good to see you, Muriel. Bye, Rabbi. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Nice meeting you, Roberta.
Yes, you as well.